Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Volunteer West Virginia Wednesday of 2026. We're so happy to see you all. We're going to get started in about 1 minute, but we have a really interesting chat box question in the meantime. So I'm in the Olympic spirit. I watched the opening ceremony last week. So we want to know, what organization are you with? And if you could win a gold medal in any Olympic sport, what would it be? So go ahead, take a second to introduce yourself and share what Olympic sport you want to be a gold medalist in just for today. All right, so we have lots of good questions or answers in the chat box. We have Sandy Hunt. It's good to see you from Wetzel County, one of my New Martinsville friends. And she said ice dancing. I said ice skating, which maybe that's the same as ice dancing. So I need to get my facts straight. And then we have Marissa Fox with the Girl Scouts of Black Diamond here in Charleston, and they would like to try extreme sledding. Let's see what else we have. Jasper. Hi, Jasper. He's with the WDEP Project Wet Vista. It's nice to see an AmeriCorps member here. And they would like to try mountain biking, if only it was an Olympic sport. So then Jasper said they would go with rock climbing. And then Matthew Atwood from Catholic Charities. It's good to see you, Matt. He would like to get a gold medal in swimming. Let's do one more. Blake is with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition, and they're into bobsledding. So if you haven't answered yet, take a second, dream big about what Olympic sport you'd like to receive a gold medal in while I do our introductions this morning or this afternoon. So it's nice to meet you. My name's Dana Bryant. If you haven't met me before, I'm with Volunteer West Virginia, and I'm joined by my colleague and friend Gina. She's going to be here helping out with the chat box in the beginning of our session, and she'll be letting you in and out of the waiting room. So if you get kicked out during the meeting, know that we'll let you back in. Just go ahead and rejoin throughout the whole training. And also, we'll be recording today's presentation, and I'll be sending it out after our training today. So no need to take notes if you don't feel like it. I'll send out the recording and Shannon's slides as well. So we're really excited to kick off our first webinar of 2026. We started this project during COVID as a way to connect, and we've held on to it ever since. We really love it. It's one of my favorite things I do. This is a free monthly training webinar series that we host at Volunteer West Virginia, where we explain our programs, we network, we provide trainings, and most of all, we have fun. So this is going to be a really laid back use of your hour. So just sit back and relax. We really appreciate you sharing your time with us. So it's exciting to share all the topics we're going to be covering in the next year. So you can check out your screen. In March, we're going to be talking about AmeriCorps. So whether you're interested in becoming an AmeriCorps member or encouraging the community you work with to become AmeriCorps members, or even hosting an AmeriCorps member, we'll be talking about that in March in honor of AmeriCorps Week. And then in April, we have one of our most popular topics, and this is going to be for National Volunteer Month. We're going to be talking about volunteer retention and recognition strategies, so you're not going to want to miss that. And then May, this is always a very popular training. It's going to be 2 hours, and that's going to be grant writing nuts and bolts with Nikki Bentley Colhart from the Grant Advantage. That's based out of Buchanan. And then in June, we're going to be talking about you got the grant, and then what are the top 8 mistakes you make after receiving the grant. So that's going to be Nikki as well, and that's going to be a 2-hour training. And then in July, we have a brand new training. This one I'm really interested about. It's about the roles and legal duties of board members, because board members are volunteers too. So they need some training as well. So if you have board members in your organization, be sure to sign up for that. And we'll have trainings all throughout the year, all the way to December. So you can visit our full schedule at our website, volunteerwv.gov. and you can go ahead and register and get all those Zoom calendar invites on your calendar for this year. We wanted to share some really exciting news before we get started. Nominations opened yesterday for the Governor Service Awards. So if you have an outstanding volunteer in your community or in your organization, this is a great time to recognize them. You can see all the different categories that'll be recognized this year. So we have youth, young adult, senior, and then lifetime achievement. That's someone's entire life of volunteerism. So if you have a superstar that has volunteered for years and years, that's a really great way to recognize them. And then we always like to point out all these awards are for significant activities in the past year. So maybe look back in your community or in your volunteer program and think of someone that's really stood out. You can nominate up to 3 volunteers for this award. And then the award ceremony will be held in August at the Culture Center here in Charleston. So we would love for you to submit your nomination by April 1st on our website. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about facilitation and group dynamics. And I'm really happy to share that we have an expert in the field, Shannon Stober. She's visiting us in Zoom land from Montana, but we know her from the AmeriCorps world. She was an AmeriCorps member in 2002. And when she was a member, she learned that she loved facilitating. She would do it every chance she got. And then she was fortunate enough to start her own business in 2015. And she's been doing it ever since. So welcome, Shannon. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Dana. Good afternoon, my friends in West Virginia. So excited to have an opportunity to be with you again. I've had the chance to work with you over the past couple of years and show up for some of these free webinars. And so always excited to get that invitation. I don't want to take too much time, but high level, like Dana said, I am based in southwestern Montana. I've been here for 25 years, moved up here to join AmeriCorps as an AmeriCorps Vista. Did 2 terms of service, worked in the governor's office of community service here in Montana as the training officer, which is where I got my training and facilitation chops. Spent the next 9 years running AmeriCorps programs in different parts of the state. And now for about 11 years have operated as a professional trainer and facilitator and have the privilege of working all around the country with folks in a variety of different content areas. So we'll keep it kind of brief because perhaps you have met me before. And then Dana, do you want to drop your screen so I can slide share mine?
Yes. Oh, and I had a question for you while I do this. I'm dying. What is your Olympic gold medal? What would you pick?
So I was putting it in there and then I was like, am I spelling equestrian right? So I was like going to the Summer Olympics and I was like dressage, which is such an amazing art form. And I was typing it in and then I was like, I don't know if I have the E's in the right place here, and I'm supposed to be an expert, and this cannot be my introduction to the community of misspelling. So thanks for asking. It's easier to say equestrian than spell it today.
Oh, glad.
Awesome, friends. Well, we're going to flip on over. As Dana said, we want for you to just kick back, relax, enjoy your time today. My delivery in these sessions, I like to say, is kind of podcast style. So we're going to run through, I'm going to share some information with you, provide you with some tools and frameworks that you can bring forward into your facilitation and group processing skills. Throwing a couple polls in there just to get a sense of who's in the space. And always like to leave some time for Q&A at the end. For folks who have not worked with me, I talk this fast the entire time. I was just thrown onto this planet as an extremely excited person. And if I slow down too much, I will lose track. So there are a handful of folks who really can't stand that. I apologize in advance. I've got great handouts for you. You'll be able to watch the video back. So just trust that you'll hear what you are ready to hear today. So with that, let's dive on in. We got a lot to cover. Okay, so I want to begin by level setting us on some terms. So today we're going to be talking about group processing, which is this really nebulous thing. So when we're talking about group processing, we're really talking about any time we're coming together with others in dialogue, in conversation. So we're exchanging ideas or opinions or information on a particular topic or task, right? And again, we're exchanging, not necessarily downloading, exchanging. So drawing it out and exchanging information. Facilitation then really is going to be the practice of guiding group processing. So ensuring that we're doing that well so that members of the group have space to think, are prepared to engage, have opportunities to engage, and can move forward with conclusions and mutual understanding. So examples of facilitating group processing include times when maybe we are trying to move a problem to a solution, conflict to resolution, confusion to a clear path, chaos to order, disagreement to agreement. You get the idea. So before we move into some of the models, I want to give you a chance to put this into your real lived experiences. So I want to invite you to just use the chat and drop an example of when you're facilitating. So where in your role, in your scope of responsibilities and duties, are you facilitating? So let's draw up some of those examples so that we can be working with some real lived experiences, and then we'll move into the practices. So where in your world are you actively facilitating? When's it coming up? Moving a group through dialogue. Project management, absolutely. When you've got your staff together and you're working on those things, planning events. Classroom education, yes. And so workshop social action program, Shay, and I want to say that I often refer to my skill set as facilitating, which is really bringing facilitation into that educational realm. So I love that. Staff meetings. Yes, we do a lot of staff meetings, community cafe, community meetings, training new case managers. Great. Building action plans with stakeholders. I love it. Kids groups, volunteer trainings, great examples. Board meetings. Yes, thank you for being here, Ms. President. We appreciate you as a volunteer and the time you're taking. Some more around staff meetings, conflict resolution. Awesome. So again, just kind of hold that in space. So as we go through, you can be reflecting back to the example that you have to see how these things are going to overlay. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about not just facilitation, but effective facilitation, because there is a big difference. And for myself, I organize effective facilitation into 4 key practices known as the 4 Ps. If you've worked with me, you know I'm a big fan of an alliteration. So the 4 Ps of effective facilitation are process, participation, place, and presence. Process, participation, place, and presence. So we're going to start with process because really facilitation is about process. So the tool I have in front of you is a tool that I use in all different ways with my work. And I want to introduce it to us today because this is going to help us anchor our understanding of the process of facilitation. So this model is called the waterline model. It was put together by a group of researchers in like the 60s, 70s, and their curiosity were what are the sources of workplace conflict? And for them, that is defined as task disruption, things aren't getting done, and disharmony, we're not getting along. So they did some research, and what they identified that it's not what we do, the content, it's how we do it, the context that creates conflict. So it's not what we're doing, it's how we're doing it. Okay. That was hit number 1. Hit number 2, context, how we're doing it can be broken into 4 key elements. Okay. So the first contextual element is structure, vision, mission, roles and responsibilities, goals, metrics. Okay. Structure. The next one is group dynamics. So this is going to include things like trust, communication, influence, decision-making in our micro communities. Then we have our interpersonal interactions, those one-on-ones. So learning and communication skills, feedback skills, social emotional intelligence. And then finally, we have personal considerations, my internal world, story of self, psychological needs, etc. Okay, so it's not what we do, but how we do it. That creates conflict. And how we do it is represented through 4 areas: structure, group dynamics, interpersonal interactions, and personal considerations. So I want to do a poll with you guys real quick, just to get a sense from your lived experiences. From your lived experiences, which of these contextual elements creates the most conflict, task disruption, and disharmony? Is it structure, group dynamics, interpersonal relationships, or intrapersonal considerations? Which of these leads to the most conflict? So take a second, think that through. We'll see what you come up with. I always know we have a couple of folks coming in on phones and such, so we'll get as close to 100% as we can here, but I recognize not everybody has the ability to participate in a poll, which is just fine. Okay, get about 10 more seconds. Awesome. Okay, so let's see what we came up with. So this group answered this as would be expected anytime we're asking the general population. When we ask the general population what's contributing to the conflict, we tend to automatically go into the parts where we have to interact with the other humans. So we're like, yeah, that's group dynamics, right? I have a meme I used to use that was like, working together sure is better without you, right? And then those interpersonal relationships, those one-on-ones, right? That is what our brain is wired. However, what the research shows is that more than 80% of the time, the source of the conflict, the root of the conflict is inadequate structure. Okay. Inadequate structure is the primary reason that we're experiencing conflict. So we're going to start there when we're thinking about our facilitation and the process of it and naming the importance of the structure. So when we're thinking about structure in the context of a facilitation, we're thinking about having clear goals and desired outcomes. Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? We're talking about providing people with resources that support them in meeting that goal, right? Giving them the tools they need to show up how you need them to show up. If we're making a decision, we need to have a clear decision-making model, have that understood, clear roles and responsibilities within the facilitation, good time boundaries, and then group agreements around why we're here and how we're showing up. This is the container of your facilitation. This is the structure that holds group processing. We need all of these tools. So tip number one, have adequate structure. We'll touch back on this, but really the success of your effort kind of begins and sometimes ends here. So we want to make sure we're paying attention to structure. Again, in your handouts, you'll have some more rigorous information on that, okay? Now, just because structure is our primary source of conflict and somewhere that we want to be putting a lot of our attention, that doesn't mean that group dynamics, interpersonal interactions, and personal considerations don't matter. Of course they do, which that's going to bring us into the concept of process, right? Process. Process is one of those terms that we throw around loosely all the time. So let's go ahead and just define it before we explain what process is in a facilitation lens. So process is simply how we move from point A to point B in a predictable and neutral manner, right? Neutral being the process is set, right? The steps are there. This isn't about opinion. When we think about process and facilitation, it's the structure that we're using to hold the group dynamics, interpersonal relationships, and personal considerations. So what I'm trying to say to you is process is a structure, and it's the structure that we use to manage those other elements. Now, this can be hard to understand. So let's go ahead and name what the 4 steps of process are, and then we'll put it into the context of a meeting to give you a sense of what this means. So process, regardless of what style of convening and group processing you're doing, will always include the following 4 steps. Number 1, naming your structures, naming the container, getting everybody into the same fishbowl so we understand where we are. Number 2, generating information, uploading. Again, we group process to draw information out. That's why we do it. Number 3, now that we've generated all this information, we have to refine it, right? We have to narrow it. And then number 4, closing, confirming understanding, naming what was learned, what was decided, and how we move it forward. So again, let's put this in the lens of a staff meeting to give us a sense of what this would actually look like. So let's say I'm having a staff meeting or any kind of a meeting. I'm going to begin by naming structures. What does that look like? By me saying, here is the goal of the meeting. Here's why we're getting together. Then I'm going to ask the other people, is that what you were expecting to talk about today? Do we agree that this is our focus, right? Naming that out front, being clear on what your objectives are. Then we're going to say, okay, if this is our goal, these are the steps that we're going to take to meet that goal, which I'm going to show you here in a minute because that's open, narrow, close, and the time we have to do it. Now, naming your steps and your timeline together are critical because time is the lever I have to keep us moving forward. So if I say we have 3 steps to complete and we have an hour to do it, well, then at the 15-minute mark, I can start saying things like, let's give this piece about 5 more minutes, but then we're going to have to move on. Okay. So steps and your time boundaries are critical levers. And then finally, roles and responsibilities. And this can be as simple as saying something like, hey, would you mind keeping time? Can you take notes? Or this might be really describing a decision-making model by saying things like, we're taking input, but the decision will not be made by this group. So again, just making people feel clear on what we're doing. Once we've done that, now we're off, right? Next step is opening, generating information. So again, we group process to draw information out. So looking for different opinions, perspectives, needs, defining a problem, conflict, or opportunity, exploring different ideas, issues, and solutions. Now, as we move forward, we'll talk about some tools for participation and practices of a facilitator that support us in doing that. But suffice to say, step one, drawing it out. We call it opening. Now that we've done that, we have all that information. Our next step then is to narrow. And now we have to refine it. So we're going to look at all this information and we're going to say, cool, what are the patterns and themes that are emerging? Where can I group ideas to get a clearer picture of where we're headed? Where do we have common ground to move from? If we're making a decision, what are the limiting factors, knowledge, resources, expertise? And if we are in a decision-making meeting, this would be the point of the meeting that we take that decision. And then finally, closing. And listen, I'll tell you the number of times I get called in to work with groups because they can't figure out why they can't get their stuff going. It's because they don't close, right? Closing, we have to shut it down. So closing says, hey, we were here to accomplish this goal. Did we accomplish it? Was there anything that was missed or overlooked that if we don't name now and carry out of the room is going to undermine what we just tried to accomplish? This is where we're going to confirm decisions that have been made and we're going to seek consensus. And to be clear, seeking consensus does not mean that we all agree. It means that we all agree a decision has been made, distinctly different things. If we don't name that and people walk out of the door, maybe Jimmy, who didn't want that decision, didn't go his way, is going to walk out acting like he didn't know it, right? Then we're going to identify takeaways. Okay, great. Now that we've learned this, made this decision, what are our next steps? What do we need to do? And what is the plan? Okay, so closing is critical. So these are the 4 steps to process. And this will show up whether you're writing a training, facilitating a meeting, navigating conflict, right? It's going to be these same 4 steps. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Each and every one of us have one of these steps that we just like naturally default to. So some of us are tone setters, right? And so we're very relational. Well, how do we feel? Do we all agree? Is this going to meet everybody's needs? Those folks will never even start the meeting because the whole time they're tone setting. Then we have our openers, right? Like these are idea factories. So you're done, you're getting ready to walk out the door and they're like, yeah, but have we ever thought about spaceships? And you're like, shut it down. Like we already did that. Narrowers, no brainstorming. Every idea, like, we've tried that. We can't do that. That's not going to work, right? They don't allow the creativity. They're narrowing and evaluating every piece of information. And my closers, God bless them, these are the people who open the meeting by going, where's the checklist? What do we need done? What's my role? You're like, we haven't even gotten there. Okay. So quickly, I want to give you an opportunity to think about yourselves. We're going to just do one more poll. And I want for you to think about, where do you default to? Which one of these process points do you go to most often? Because it's going to give you information about how you're showing up as a facilitator, right? And where you need to pay attention. So are you a tone setter, relational, just like, does everybody feel okay? Like we don't actually have to do things. We're going to just make sure we all feel agreement. Opener, idea factory, narrower, kind of like, devil's advocate, evaluating ideas, looking to refine too close. Are you a closer? Are you the checklist person? What are we going to do next? So you should be seeing that poll in front of you. Again, none of us is one thing at all times, but just curious, which one do you see yourself defaulting to? Where do you spend too much time?
Yeah, Shannon, the poll appeared and then it flashed away. So it's
I was wondering, I was like, they didn't seem like they were disengaged. Okay, let's try again. Thanks, Cheyenne. Are we seeing it now? Thank you. All right, now we're coming in hot. All right. Give it just a couple more seconds here. All right, here we go. So check it out. And this tends to be the case. We tend to be pretty evenly split. Oftentimes our process orientation is a reflection of our mind style, our cognition preferences, right? And we oftentimes move towards that piece because we truly believe it's the most important or the only one that's necessary, okay? So we're thinking about process. This is the key structure that's going to hold our effort together. We have to use all 4 steps. They have to go in order. So when you're designing, this is going to be your first piece. Am I designing in such a way that's moving us through this? Now, we could spend the entire session just on that topic, but I want to make sure we get a couple others in. So we're going to keep it moving forward. So the second P in facilitation is participation. So now that we have our structures and our process, now we have to ask ourselves, how am I enabling people to participate? Again, group processing is not about a download. It's not about, I need everybody together so I can explain this, right? Maybe that's teaching, maybe that's correcting, maybe that's lecturing. What group processing is not one dimensional. It is about bringing other voices forward. Okay. So we have to really focus on that. There's a whole lot of different ways we can think about participation. So I just want to give you two simple ones that you can consider bringing forward or refining in what you're already doing. So the first way we're going to think about this is by that very simple learning needs model. And the second way we're going to think about this is processing needs, right? How do people process and come up with thoughts and contribute? So there's a good chance you've seen this. This is a very, very simple learning model that would assert that human beings have three pathways of bringing information in and making meaning out of it. So we can take information in visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically with our body. When we're designing a facilitation, and if my goal is to enable participation, I need to recognize that all of these modes need to be incorporated. It's about designing a space in such a way that I'm anticipating and meeting these needs. So when we're thinking about visual learners, these folks are going to maybe need handouts, things in writing. So they want a slide deck. Maybe they need to be in a space, right, that has some movement, has some natural light. Maybe they need to be able to see who's speaking. We're going to talk about spacing angles in a moment, but how am I meeting the needs of my visual learners? Next, auditory, right? Folks who hear. So this isn't just about being able to hear you, right, or you speaking at them. It's also about hearing multiple voices and being able to use their own, right? So we're thinking about auditory learning. We have to enable that, which is going to come forward here in a second. And then kinesthetic, these are people who learn through movement, who learn through motion. Now, it can seem silly to be like, Shannon, it's a board meeting. Like, what are we going to do kinesthetically? You'd be amazed what happens when you say, hey, just get on your feet real quick and pair up with somebody you're not seated next to, right? Or let's go ahead and take a quick break. I'm going to talk more about that. We're going to do an activity. Like, bringing kinesthetic elements forward for people is really important. Again, pretty common, regularly used tool. So I don't want to go too deep into this, but this is an area for you to step back and say, am I doing enough to accommodate different learning styles? Oftentimes we teach how we learn. So if you are an auditory learner, you might be overly dependent on speaking, etc. So just kind of take notice of that. The next piece that often tends to be a little bit more overlooked, and I find people have curiosity in, is thinking about our processing styles, right? What is the style of space and how do we draw our best thinking forward? So this is where we're going to visit the world of introversion and extroversion. Excitingly, over the last 20 years, when I ask people who's heard of it, most hands go up, right? So we're talking about this. So let's go ahead and define what this is and then talk about how it's showing up in a processing standpoint. So introversion and extroversion is a spectrum that comes from the Myers-Briggs personality type assessment. And essentially it says those of us who are extroverted are people who are engaged in the outer world, right? So we gain energy through engagement with the outer world, people, ideas, etc. Those of us who are introverted are engaged in the inner world. So we recharge and we gain energy by having an opportunity to be in our inner world. And that's often how we talk about it, is in terms of how we gain energy. But there's also a big distinction with how we process. So extroverts, because they're engaged with the outer world, process ideas verbally, externally. So if you were to be like, hey, Shannon, what do you got going on this weekend? And I'm being my extroverted self, I'd be like, oh man, well, Joe and I were going to go ahead and we're going to grab lunch. I think Bob and Danielle were coming by. We were going to go to the Pablo show, but I wanted to make sure we got some skiing in, but that would probably have to be Sunday. And they'd be like, cool. So you're going to that show, you're going to Pablo's show with Dan and Bob, and you're going to try and go to the ski this weekend. I'll be like, yeah, right. I had to say all that to understand, right? For somebody else to receive it. Introverted Shannon, if you're like, hey, Shannon, what do you got going on this weekend? I'm going to go, I think we're going to go to Pablo's show with Bob and Danielle, and then I'm going to try and ski on Sunday. They just did the exact same thing, but they needed to do it internally. Okay, they had to do it internally. Introverts need internal space to think things through. Extroverts need external space to think things through. Okay, so this is really important in terms of how we design And so some strategies that I would love for you to consider so that we're engaging the best of both of these styles of thinking. Number one, if you have materials that need to be considered, that need to be brought to attention, give them out ahead of time, right? People need that information, particularly introverts, to be like, okay, I'm reading this, I'm considering this, I'm taking time to sort out my thoughts. They need that internal space. So providing those resources ahead of time. Another trick that I use is I will ask people to go into one-on-one pairs all the time, even if there's only 4 people in the room. I will do this. Why? Because one-on-one pairs are going to hit both needs. Number one, in that one-on-one pair, that extrovert that needs to just be like blah 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 to like work through their ideas, they have the space to do that. My introvert that needs a minute to kind of think about it, they have space to do that. When I bring everybody back to the group, the extroverts have cleared what they need to do. They have their thoughts in place and can offer those. The introverts have had a moment to reflect. Okay, so one-on-ones are actually a great opportunity. Small groups work similarly well. What I like about both of those is that's going to meet that auditory need of hearing other voices. One tool I like to use, especially when I know that I got my introverts are sort of sitting back and not participating, I'll simply go, hey, you know what? Let's just do a once around, right? We're just going to do a once around. We're going to start over here. I expect to hear from everybody, right? So a once around is a really nice way to get those introverts to kind of bring their ideas to the full group. And then this last one, I always like to make people try and pronounce it. Nestuiso, right? What does this mean? This is a rule when my extroverts are out of control where I say, hey, nobody speaks twice until everybody's spoken once, right? So that's when I have my extroverts that are overly dominating or maybe don't have the self-awareness to recognize that they're taking too much on. So I'll use an esuso and put that in play of like everybody has to speak once before somebody can speak twice. Sometimes if I have a group with an extrovert just kind of answering the question and jumping in all the time, I'll actually name kindly. I'll be like, hey, I love everything you're contributing, but you're letting everybody else off the hook. So I want to keep hearing from you, but you're letting them off the hook and we need to hear from them. So it's okay to name those things, right? So we're thinking about participation, just baseline learning theory, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, but really inviting ourselves to think about processing needs. If we're trying to upload and hear from everybody, we have to create a space that enables that. Okay. So that's going to bring us to the third P, which is place, right? Which is the place, which again, I think is often overlooked. So we can have this wonderful process, right? And good structures, and we can have embedded in our process different ways to increase participation. But if we selected a poor place for that to occur, it won't matter, okay? It won't matter. So when we're thinking about place, a couple things that I like to include, folks, right? Number one, basic needs. So in this place, do we have access to a restroom? How is the temperature? Do we have water? Right? This is about remembering that we're mammals and mammals need stuff to focus, right? So we can also think about, do we have sunlight? Do we have color? Do we have different things that will inspire thinking and engagement? Next is actually stepping back, coming back to that learning style model that we can use to increase participation and saying, what in this environment could distract from that? Auditory distractions. I did a training a couple of weeks ago and there was a speaker buzzing in the room the entire time, right? It totally detracted from what was happening, right? Sometimes it's like we're echoing in the room. You can hear something on the other side of a wall. So what in this space would draw people's attention, especially my auditory learners, of which I'm one? If I hear something in the background, that's it. I'm lost. Visual distractions. I once went into a meeting here in Bozeman, Montana, which is based on where I'm kind of located. And they set up the room so that the people that were speaking were standing in front of the windows. So we were all just blinded, just staring at the light. Like this was a visual distraction. Sometimes it can be the light. Sometimes it can be, oh, there's something happening over here. One time I was trying to do a retreat and all of a sudden this woman brought like 8 puppies outside. And I was like, listen, time out, go. I can't, there's no way that I'm going to keep your attention when there's puppies running around, right? So just monitoring that. And then physical distractions. And so for me, this is like, is this chair uncomfortable, right? Am I seated at a table that has me squished and I'm too close to people? I'm outside of my comfort zone, right? So just making sure that we can physically be in our bodies. And then the last piece I like to think about when we're talking about place is our use of space and angles. So on this slide, I've got a bunch of different pictures, right? That are different ways or different environments that we might be doing some facilitation in. Each and every one of these, based on the space and angles, is sending a different message. It's sending a message about what are we here to do? Who's in charge? What's your role? Right? Space and angles communicate very, very intentionally. So you can look over, we have the round tables in the conference room. That implies we want to be discussing at the table, right? We want to be doing that work. Beneath that, we have that tight circle, no tables in front of us, right? That implies that this is creative, right? And we're all on the same page. The rows of chairs looking forward, like this is a download. We have the rows of chairs in a chamber looking at the seats of power. We have this weird one over here where we're incredibly too tight. We're almost holding hands. Our knees are touching. Obviously, we're trying to do some deep team building. You get the idea. Ask yourself, what am I conveying to my group through my choice of space and angles? One time years ago, I did a training for an AmeriCorps program that is associated with Montana Legal Services, and they used the actual Supreme Court chambers. They were like, well, that's the room. We thought it would be cool to do it here. And I was like, no, this is not cool at all. Like, I look like I'm a judge. This is not the vibe I'm trying to create. So again, ask yourself, how is this accommodating basic needs, comfort, right? How is it contributing to or disabling those learning needs via distraction? And what's being communicated here via the space and angles, okay? So process, your key structures are everything. That includes tone set, open, narrow, and close. Participation, this is an upload. This is meant to be generative, two-way. So we want to think about learning needs, processing needs, and place. You can have all of these things settled really, really nicely. And if you default to the room you're always in, you pick a room that's not a good fit, it will undermine all of those efforts, okay? So then the final piece that we're going to talk about, oh, excuse me, I forgot about this slide. A couple little tips for you before we talk about it. A couple little tips for place and things. Number one, call breaks so people can stay in their bodies. I see this like particularly board meetings are great examples where we don't think like breaks are, it's like, no, take 15 minutes, let people move, reset their bodies. Incorporate energizers and icebreakers. Now, there's always the squeaky wheels. I'm gonna be clear, it's the squeaky wheels are like, I hate that, but they're usually not the majority. And the reality is energizers and icebreakers are evidence-based practices that increase participation and attention spans. So even, taking a quick break, throwing in a quick little game, a quick little motion activity. One of my absolute favorites when I'm working with large groups is this game called Entourage, where people pair up and they play 2 out of 3 paper, rock, scissors. And then whoever wins is still in the game. And the person who lost is their entourage member and has to follow them and hype them up and cheer. At the end, you just have 2 people going head to head, paper, rock, scissors. Everybody else in the room is screaming and jumping up and down. I'm talking 75-year-old men will get really into this too. Takes 3 minutes, right? Things like that just activate. Another thing that I like to do that is simple. So maybe we're in the middle of something and I can feel energy waning and I'm like, man, we just need 10 more minutes. We're right there, but I know that I don't have people. As I'll say, take 60 seconds, find a new seat in the room, go. And it's like, get up, move quickly, take a new angle. You have new neighbors, right? The light's a little bit different. So sometimes that little kind of flip of the switch can bring people back. And then finally, and this one's huge for me, let people do them. So what that means is I tell folks, if you need to stand, stand. If you need to do something with your hands, do it. I have people, that knit during class and they're like, well, isn't that rude for somebody to be knitting during your class? I'm like, no way. They're kinesthetic. That's keeping them dialed in with me. It's not like they're teaching themselves to knit. That would be different, right? If people need to use the restroom, like all of these things, just give folks some autonomy to be in the space in a way that's going to make the most sense for them, so long as it's not distracting from other people. And remember that facilitation is about making something easy, not holding control, okay? Which is going to bring us to this last piece, right? When we're thinking about our presence. So when we think about facilitation, I always like to say that facilitation is the art of taking leadership without taking control. And that's really going to be anchored in our presence, how we're showing up with people. So again, we've got great structures and a process. We've got the good place, it's going to work. We've thought about participation. Now we have to say, how am I showing up? Who am I showing up as in this space? And so I'm going to give you a couple of basic practices to consider. And again, we can, and I often do, spend multiple days on just this topic. So hopefully it's anchoring into things you already know or giving you curiosity around things that you might consider. Okay, so the first piece as a facilitator, your job is to notice what is happening within the room. Okay. Now, what a tool that I use to better understand this is this tool in front of us, which is the communication pie chart. So what this tool tells us is that when we're communicating, particularly in person, only 7% of the meaning in that communication is through our spoken word, right? The words we're using. 38% is coming by way of our vocal cues, paraverbals, or how we're saying things. And 55% is coming by way of our body language, right? Those visual cues. So as a facilitator, my job is not just to hear people, which we'll talk about in a second, is to observe, is to notice, right? So I'll give you a couple tools within each of these zones, things that you can be looking for and wanting to notice just to activate yourself. So when we're thinking about our vocal cues or how we're saying things, we can break it down in a handful of ways. The first way we break it down is going to be through our use of volume and pace. How loud or how quietly we're speaking, how quickly or how slowly we're speaking. Now, each of those kind of have dual meaning. There are certain ways that we use those that have social understanding. So for example, if I'm like, that's a secret, right? If I'm like being loud, that's urgency. So we have messages that we send, but each and every one of us, through our personal lived experiences and conditioning, also have stories about what each of those mean. So I don't know if this comes across via webinar, probably does, but I'm a pretty exceptionally loud person, right? Whatever this little doodad here is, mine happens to be super pronounced. I have an ex-boyfriend once who told me it's because God was like, shh, right? I'm a loud person. So when I come into the room, what do people make it mean, right? Some people are like, oh, she's exciting, she's enthusiastic, she's confident. Other people are like, she's overbearing, right? She's too much. So we have to ask ourselves, when people's voices, what am I making that mean? What additional meaning am I adding to their contributions based on my story of their voice? Number one. Number two, noticing when people shift. So for again, if I come in the room and I'm being all loud and being mean, nobody's like, what does it mean? But if I get quiet and I slow down, people are like, what does that mean? Right? So again, notice that. Notice that. Other places that we want to notice is going to be through our use of pitch and tone. So pitch and tone is kind of the highs and the lows and the breadth, the width of how we speak. I always like to say pitch and tone is the tool of the sarcastic. It is the weapon of the passive aggressive. It is how we say what we want to say without actually having to be accountable for saying. So you know what I mean? You're in a meeting and you're like, okay, so how's everybody feeling today? And somebody's like, fine. And you're like, what? Right? Right? Like you said fine, but you clearly told me you're not fine. Okay. So those are some examples of what we're listening. Body language, we're reading it intuitively all the time. So I want to notice expressions. When I'm teaching and if I see somebody in the back doing this, I'm like, hey, time out real quick. What's going on for you? Right? I read that expression. Space and angles, if they're turning away, if they're turning towards, they're sending us message. Closed body language, are they closing themselves off, being defensive? Open body language, are they ready to proceed? Okay. Again, body language is a fascinating body of work. No pun intended. And I encourage you to be thinking about that. How am I reading? How am I taking that in? We're oftentimes doing this intuitively without recognizing it. Suffice to say, facilitators, you have to be anchored in your presence, which is noticing, watching the room, taking in the subtleties, taking in the cues. Now, when you see something, when you notice something, your next step is to get curious about it and ask questions, right? This isn't about telling people, well, you're clearly mad about it. I don't know that, right? Maybe you're mad. Maybe you got indigestion. I don't know, right? So my job is to see that, notice that, and ask questions about it. Ask questions about it. So what we have in front of us is the powerful question pyramid. And this is a tool that we can support the practice of inquiry, which is asking curious questions. I just like to introduce this to help people understand that there are a variety of different types of questions and that they all serve a different purpose, okay? So at the base of this pyramid, we have our least powerful questions, which are yes or no, closed-ended questions. these are questions that we use when we want to confirm, right? Did we say this? Are we doing that? Do we agree? That is the only use of them, okay? Next, above that, we have descriptive questions. These are about external identifiers, qualifiers. Who was there? When did it happen, right? Naming the kind of the world we're operating in. Now, beyond that, we start to get into the powerful questions, which are going to bring us into our internal world, right? Where we have to start drawing connections and making meaning. Those questions begin with words like what, right? So what can we do differently with this? Or what might happen if we didn't go that direction? How might another person be looking at this? Why is this important for us, right? So when we are noticing those things and when we're designing, we really want to think about the questions that we're asking. Asking questions, its own practice. I didn't mention this when we began, but in addition to doing training and facilitation, I'm also a certified life coach. Now, to be clear, I did not become a life coach because I was like, hey, I should be a life coach. I did it because I put that I offered coaching services on LinkedIn, and some lady saw it and couldn't mind her own business and told me I couldn't offer that unless I was certified. And so I did it to spite her. And it was probably one of the best certifications I've ever gotten, because not only did it help me in that, it truly strengthened my facilitation, because it was basically a 6-month class on how to ask questions. So a tool that you can look at if you want to study this a bit more is just the concept of powerful questions. I always tell folks, you can Google just the term powerful questions, and you will be hit with thousands of PDFs containing all of these powerful questions, right? Creating insight, going into that deeper level. So I encourage people, go find some of those tools and identify 5 that really show up for you, that you love. So for example, one of my favorite powerful questions to ask is, what surprised us about this? Because I don't know the answer, and neither do people usually, right? Find those 5 that you love and just start doing reps. Bring them forward. Keep asking them until they become muscle memory, okay? So again, when we're facilitating, I need to notice and I need to know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for changes in my vocal cues. I'm looking for body language. And then when I notice that, I have to be courageous enough to ask a question about it. So like I said, if I'm sitting in a room and I'm explaining something and I see somebody sitting in the back going, doing that number, I'm going to be like, hey, real quick, what's going on here? Let's talk it through. Is this, what's coming forward for you? Right. So again, noticing it, moving forward with that curiosity. Now, if I'm asking questions because I noticed it, then it should go without saying that I need to actually listen to what you're telling me back. Right. So this is going to bring us into that core practice of active listening. And I know active listening is something that we frequently talk about, particularly in our nonprofit communities, but it's always worth a re-mention. So active listening is listening with the intention of understanding. Listening with the intention of understanding. And I want to say that clearly, because very often when I ask who's heard of active listening, all the hands go up and I say, tell me what it is. And all people do is tell me how to perform it. They're like, well, you have to nod and you have to encourage people and you have to, be facing their direction. I'm like, yeah, that is actually how we perform listening. That's part of it. But active listening isn't a performance. It's listening for understanding. What is this person trying to convey, right? So when we're facilitating, part of our job is to actively listen around the room. And again, this requires presence. So if I notice something and I ask a question and you're giving me information back, I have to give you the deepest amount of attention I can so that I can understand what you're saying, right? So yes, I'm going to demonstrate that, but I'm also going to ask those questions to dig further, suspend judgment. You know what I mean? There's folks in our lives and in our circles, you're like, well, here goes Todd again, right? And we just kind of dismiss them, let our brain just jump to that conclusion. Pause, suspend judgment, know what's actually coming forward here. Now, as folks are working and giving us information, depending upon the length, 2 practices I use is, one is repeating. So word for word, so that people know, like, I heard that. So you're saying we need to remember what happened in July when we are coming to this next year, right? Like that word for word. That's really important for introverts, by the way, who have thought that through. The other side is paraphrasing, which is, here's what I'm hearing. Is this what you're trying to say? Or this is what I'm making it mean. So sometimes extroverts, you're like, hey, okay, that was a lot of information. Is this what you were getting at? Right. And people will be like, absolutely. Or no, that's not it. And they'll shift it. Or you can say, okay, this is what I'm making it mean, especially if you think other people in the room might be having that same conclusion. Okay. So we're going to repeat, we're going to paraphrase. And then the final step with that, if active listening is listening to confirm understanding, then it should go without saying that we need to confirm understanding before we've closed this down. So confirming understanding is, okay, this is what you said. This is what you were trying to say. What did I miss? What did I miss? Not did I miss anything? That's closed, right? We're shutting people down. We're signaling that we want to keep moving. What did I miss? The assumption that I missed something. Take 1 second for that person to offer anything else that was there, re-summarize, and put it forward. Okay. So again, as we're in this space, like, and this is a lot to carry, we're thinking about the process. Okay, where are we going? Are we moving around the timeline? Oh, we just went back to opening and we're narrowing. I need to bring us back into this direction. Like, okay, let me make sure everybody has a chance to participate. And the whole time you're also doing your best to listen and be as present as you possibly can. I had mentioned to Dana that, sometimes facilitation can be challenging to teach virtually, because at the end of the day, it really is an embodied practice. Okay, it's an embodied practice. And it's one of those things that we can only get better at with practice, with putting the repetitions in. Okay, so that presence piece is huge. So the final piece I want to wrap up with here, and then we'll take a couple of minutes for you guys to share insights and ask questions, really is just the element of trust. So as a facilitator, everything I just named to you is about creating and sustaining trust. Process is neutral. It's never personal, right? Going out of my way to encourage your participation shows that I value you, that I want you here. Asking questions, being curious, notice what's happening to you. These are all ways that I'm trying to create and maintain trust, because once I've lost trust with this group, my facilitation will not be effective, okay? So a couple of other notes on building trust, right? Some ways that we want to consider ourselves in this space. So number one, you have to be neutral. You have to be neutral. If you're trying to facilitate a conversation about a decision and you already know what that decision should be or what you want it to be, there's no way that you can facilitate that in a manner that allows other people to be heard. You will ask leading questions. You will kind of move towards the person who agrees with you. Like when you're outside of neutrality, we're not facilitating, okay? So you have to ask yourself, like, am I neutral? Do I have a stake in this? Do I have a conclusion I want to see? If you do, great, cool, no problem. Get somebody else to facilitate it so that you can participate, right? So this doesn't mean you must operate in neutrality at all times. It just means if you're not neutral, give yourself a chance. Next, center other voices. Center other voices. Find the people who aren't speaking up. Find the people who are only offering things quietly. Find those people that have something to say and center them, right? Center them. Centering a voice looks like taking the idea that might be pushing back or might be a little bit challenging and saying, let's go ahead and pause here. Let's bring that back. Let's go ahead and let's reemphasize what's being said here or get curious, right? So pushing out, centering other voices, do not fall into making it your own, right? Don't fall into making it your own. This one, and this one's tough. Let others be right, right? Let other be right. There are times you're going to be there and you got a process and you got an idea, right? And you're going to deliver it a certain way. And somebody in the room is going to say, that's not what it is. I'm not feeling that. I'm not seeing that, right? Just let them be right. I have seen so many facilitators fall because they get caught in needing to be right in front of the room when it's not even your role, right? It's not even your role. So I work with young people a lot, and it turns out they're a lot smarter than most of us. And they will catch me and they'll be like, Stober, this and that. And I'm like, you know what? Snaps. Perfect. Awesome. Give me more information on how we can incorporate that, right? Respond to that feedback. So if we're letting other people be right, or if they're telling you in the moment, like, hey, that's not working, or the way you said that actually was a little bit triggering or dismissive of a certain group of people, respond to that feedback. Let them be right. I once was teaching about body language, actually, to a group of college students, one of whom happened to be from one of our tribal nations. And I said something around, what is our historically dominant culture's story about eye contact, which I'm feeling like is a wonderful way to introduce the concept that eye contact is cultural. And this gal who had told me at lunch, I wasn't planning to stick around, but this is pretty good. So I was like, okay, this gal looks over her shoulder and she looks at me and she goes, who's dominant culture? And I was like, corrected. Right. And I brought it to the group. I said, here's how I phrased that. That was incorrect. How else might we do it? Right. So again, let the group lead, trust the group, let them kind of bring those things forward. And again, and then just finally shift to their needs. If you're like, we're here to talk about this thing today, and that group is moving hard in another direction, and you see that that's where the energy needs to go, allow it, right? Follow it. So building trust is really important. Okay, last piece, my friends, right, that I always like to bring forward. At the end of the day, when we're thinking about our presence and when we're thinking about how we show up, I encourage everybody to show up in their authenticity, in your own personal leadership signature. So again, when I'm facilitating, I'm big, I'm very loud, I move around, I talk fast, right? I cuss, right? It's all this action and activity. That is authentic to me. People respond to that because of my authenticity, not necessarily because that's their preferred energy. Each and every one of you have an authentic way of being. One of my favorite individuals to co-facilitate with is this guy. He's a poet. His name's Lowell. And I always say, when I'm facilitating, I'm up on the wheel, right? 10 and 2. Lowell is like laid back, one finger on the wheel. Guy hardly says anything. Everything he says is a whisper, right? And people can't stop paying attention to him. So again, knowing like, how do I show up? Like, what are my particular gifts and talents? What is it about me that when I'm in full alignment, right, can like show that to other people? So really think about that. Think about your authenticity. And as you're doing all of this, just remember this work is always about the group. It's not about you, right? Trust that the group is capable of getting this done. Trust the process, right? I say that all the time to new facilitators. Trust the group, trust the process. If we trust the group and we trust the process, we will get where we need to go. So my friends, that was a fire hose of facilitation. I am going to be following up with, or Dana will follow up. You've got a pretty extensive handout packet. You'll get a video of this session for today. There's a lot of information, so I know you might want to take a moment to look back. But we've just got a couple of minutes left. So I wanted to make sure that we left a little space for questions and insights. So what I'd love to invite you to do is, if you are able to use the chat, maybe just drop down, like, what was that thing that sparked for you today? What was that thing you're like, ooh, good reminder, or that's got my curiosity. So as we're doing that, if there's anybody here who has questions, you're welcome to just turn your camera on, raise your real hand or your Zoom hand, and we can unmute you to do questions. So insights in the chat, but if you have questions, you're welcome to let me know and we can dialogue. And I'll look at this chat to see those coming in. Oh, thank you, Manuela. I'm glad that the authenticity. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And she says, I'm totally crocheting. I love it. Yeah, the 3 learning styles, such a simple little thing, right? Just to be like, oh yeah, that's right. Like we have to hit those. And for folks who are interested in that body of work and thinking about learning styles, another one that you might consider would be the work of multiple intelligences, which takes that model and sort of kind of brings it into a little bit more granular detail. So if you dig that stuff, that might be a good one too. Yeah, be strong in the presence, but the reminder of process and structures. And I love this because, Cheyenne, for me, having clear process and structures is what enables me to be present, right? So it's like, that's actually what shows up and lets me do that. So I love those two. Powerful questions. Yes, go find them. And questions, defined. I don't know the answer, neither do you. So wonderful, friends. Well, I am happy to hang back if there are any questions. I'll give Dana the last couple of minutes if she has anything she wants to share. And you're welcome to get in touch with me. I'm going to drop my email into the chat here. So if you have questions, want to follow up, you're always welcome to reach out. But with that, I will say thank you for your time. And Dana, I'll pass it back to you to land the plane.
Thanks so much, Shannon. And thank you all for all your sweet messages in the chat box. Shannon, I think we can say you would get the gold medal in facilitation and group dynamics. So
thank you. Nailed the landing.
I'll give you all just one more minute to share all your messages in the chat box. But in the meantime, we'll see you all in March for All About AmeriCorps. So be sure to mark your calendar. That'll be our next Volunteer West Virginia Wednesday on March 11th. And then Shannon will be back later this year to share even more trainings for us. So if you love her, be sure to add her sessions on your calendar.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks,
everybody. Enjoy yourselves in West Virginia. Bye.
All right. See you all soon. Thanks, Shannon. Bye.
Bye.